I'm going to apologize now for those of you who are getting hungry because there's some serious food porn coming. Do you have
All right.
You want to drive?
Sure, I'll take the remote. So, our topic was the old ways of whole grains. And when we started talking about this, I thought, man, this is going to be like completely opposite of what we typically do. We take grains and try to do something new and trendy and thought-provoking. And so that's when the something old is new again came about, which that certainly isn't a new statement. And I think really it was Oldways that really put that on the map. But when we start looking at the session overview today, we're going to spend some time talking about the history of grains in global cuisines. And so we're going to look at traditional recipes with the modern twist. We're going to look at how to honor traditions by telling stories through food. And then look at where does history repeat itself in modern cuisine. And then Melissa certainly covered more than we're going to cover with Gen Z, but we're going to look at who they are, what makes them tick, and how do we reach them. But the grains in global cuisines, I think, was what really hit me. I just got back from overseas. We do one overseas shows every year, and this was Seattle and Paris. And over the 5 days, I started thinking about this isn't the first time I've had this thought. I'm sure all of you have, but the world of grains, it's really quite small when you start doing shows, whether they're domestic or international. You kind of see the same people at each of these shows and realize how really small the global community is. And then I get the attendee list last week, and as I was going through there, I thought, wow, this is the place that brings, when I looked at the list, I thought, wow, we have marketing partners in there, we have suppliers, we have customers, and we have competitors, all in one room, and we're all here for the same reason. We come together for the good of the cause to promote whole grains. And so I'm going to quit talking here eventually. Coleen's going to say some things, but we start looking at the history of grains, and the first thing that is wrong with this picture, of course, is that arborio is not a whole grain as we know it, but it starts us looking at global dishes, global cuisine, and risotto being one of the really the most recognizable international dish that we're seeing a lot of variations on. But of course, it was developed in Italy, and we started seeing grains like farro start to come into the scene with risotto called farotto. And anyway, this is where you come in.
So this is a whole grain risotto. This is made with a short grain or medium grain brown rice, lending itself really well. The starch release gives it that nice creamy consistency that everyone's used to using a traditional arborio rice. So this is a way of sort of modernizing an ancient, an old recipe into a newer recipe using, in this case, the same grain, but it could be barley risotto, it could be farro, anything with a high starch release, or it could be a waxy colored rice. Lots of different ways you can expand on this, but with the addition of all of the different flavors that you can create with this. So this actually is a recipe that I developed for K-12. I think Sarah, when she introduced me, mentioned that I am, my true love now is working with K-12. I know we're going to have a session tomorrow, with a couple of USDA people and a K-12 food service director, which I'm looking forward to. This recipe was actually a one-pot dish that was created for schools. It's very popular. Kids know risotto, and they need to eat a whole grain, right, per USDA requirements.
All right. So as we started to look at what grains we could feature here with some history and a little bit of global influence, We looked at black barley, which is something that as chefs we really love working with this product. It's unique, and of course the origin, we always go back to that. We always are trying to tell a story when it comes to whatever grains we're featuring. And so black barley originated in Ethiopia, but now it's been grown in the southwest United States for quite a number of years. But what we like about it really is the functionality of this grain. So it has this really high starch release and the beautiful, brilliant color that comes with it.
Which makes it perfect for paella. Originally, this Spanish dish was made with a short grain Spanish rice called bamba. And it, again, with the starch release, it absorbs the incredible flavors. There's so much that goes into a paella. And they're beautiful in their own right, but when you put black barley in a paella, this is what you get. It's gorgeous, the colors are beautiful, you have that starch release, you have an more intense texture. Barley is kind of like the gummy bear of grains. And I mean that in a really good way. I just love the way it sort of, the chew in it, and it's very satisfying. So here's our black barley paella.
All right, and I don't think anyone in this room is probably a stranger to kamut. But again, this comes with this great story behind it. If you dig deep, you'll see that there's legend that the seeds actually came out of King Tut's tomb. You dig a little deeper than that, and you find out that it was actually an airman from Portugal in 1949, and he ended up purchasing some seeds while he was overseas, and they were thought to have come from, well, the story he got was that they came from a tomb in Egypt. But then brought them back to the States and Montana, started growing the grains in the 70s, and of course, fast forward a couple decades, and we started to see it make its entry into both retail and food service. But what we like about this grain is that it's the largest grain form of wheat in the world, and it has a kind of a slightly sweet flavor to it. So instead of using a typical bulgur wheat, we use kamut bulgur, and you'll see in the bottom corner there's a blend that we've created that has some other ingredients in it, along with the kamut bulgur, but that is the base of it.
And here is that bulgur wheat blend, the kamut blend, in a cranberry orange sunrise porridge. So when you think of porridge, generally, for many, many centuries, it has been an oat-based porridge. This is our version of a porridge, a sweet breakfast porridge, using our blend with the kamut, bulgur wheat, flax seeds, quinoa flakes, cauliflower red rice, and buckwheat, which is having a moment today. Lots of buckwheat comments today.
So this particular dish, this actually blend, came from, again, overseas. We started seeing a number of years back noticing what a focus there was on breakfast, and particularly whole grains in breakfast, and beyond whole oats or oatmeal here, we weren't seeing much in the States. So we started to introduce a lot of the recipes and using words like porridge, or words like porridge instead of hot cereal. It kind of elevated a little bit, even though porridge is that peasant dish. In history, it's now become an elevated recipe. And sorghum, we have some sorghum experts, one in particular in the audience here. So I'm not even going to attempt to give all the history that Doug can give you, but it originated in northern Africa, and it's now grown in the sorghum belt in the States, from South Dakota down to Texas. And we've started to look at both the white and red sorghum as being something that we wanted to introduce into culinary. And again, I feel like I'm a broken record here, but overseas, a couple years ago, we were talking to some suppliers that we have for other grains out of South America, and I was inquiring about the red sorghum, and they had this really puzzled look on their face, and they asked, why in the world would we ever want to bring red sorghum into our culinary portfolio, because in South America, it's only used for cattle feed. But of course, in the States, we like to bring, as chefs, bring anything we can, new, exciting, new colors into the marketplace.
So here is our sorghum blend in a savory porridge. This is red and white sorghum, wild rice, and
Naked oats.
Naked oats, naked, wild, and free. This is a lovely, very rich, eggy sort of, the egg broken in, kind of like is it carbonara that you do that, the egg broken in? Thank you. I'm glad you're sitting in front. Some roasted tomatoes, some bruleed goat cheese, and fried sage leaf. Okay, so that's a pretty modern twist on the classic porridge using cattle feed. So there we go. Ta-da! It worked.
So black rice has really had its day over the last decade. This was one of the colored rices that really kind of first entered into the food service world as something a little bit different. And the first black rice that we started to see was primarily out of Southeast Asia. And over the years, now we've started to see it emerge from other countries. Not that it was probably newly grown there, but as the interest grew from the rice coming from Southeast Asia, other countries started to produce more and more of it as that demand grew. So we actually have a Nerone black rice from the Po Valley in Italy, and now we're seeing black rice coming out of Brazil as well. But again, it kind of coming down to the functionality of the grain is really where it shines for us.
Often you'll see black rices in Southeast Asian desserts, sticky rice. It's a very waxy, very glutinous, even though it doesn't contain gluten. That's one of the terms that is used to describe it. So here it is this is our Nerone Italian black rice in a black rice pudding, which is beautiful. The color comes from the rice itself. The rice is cooked and mixed with the rest of the ingredients. It's a very simple recipe, but as you can see, it's gorgeous and delicious.
All right, so this might look a little confusing now because we got two countries up there. On the next slide, you'll see why, but we sometimes see cross-cultural dishes. So we're going to be talking about Arroz con Pollo on the next slide, and there's still some debate of whether it was originated in Spain or in Portugal. But the white rice you see on the bottom, again, we work to bring traditional dishes into our world using whole grains. So one of the blends we have has wild rice, brown rice. We have a sprouted rice in there as well as grano.
And we reworked this using the whole grain blend, and this is a K-12 recipe. This is a one-pot dish, classic take on a modern take on the classic Arroz con Pollo, which is a one-pot dish, but couldn't use the white rice traditionally used in it for K-12, of course. So here's our whole grain version of the Arroz con Pollo. And now we're going to touch on Gen Z a little bit. If you can't read that, I apologize. I will read it all to you. I was thrilled a few months back when I started to read about Gen Z, and as Melissa touched on a lot of things earlier, I feel like we're really poised as whole grains people to really take advantage of this generation. They're ready for us. We're ready for them. But here's a little history of their characteristics and why I'm excited. Well, this is not exciting, that they've never known a world without terrorism. That's terrible, but that's their reality. Since they've grown up with this sense of unease, they seek the security that cultural tradition brings. So they really sort of look for traditions in their daily lives, which is kind of surprising for young people to be doing that, but it's because of the environment that they're growing up in. They are the most ethnically diverse generation that we've ever seen. Their friends are different colors. They're of different religious backgrounds. They come from all over the world. They're curious about the new foods based on their surroundings. So they're more willing to try things because their friends maybe have a different ethnic background, and they go over to each other's homes and they see these different things, and they're curious, and well, that kid seems to like it, so I'm going to try it. They've been shaped by the recession. They seek value and authenticity and don't trust corporate greed or food claims. So they've seen their parents watch their 401ks disappear or watch their homes be taken away from them. This is the reality of the recession, and so they're untrusting of banks and corporations that maybe had lied to them, their parents, or maybe had taken things away that they just assumed were going to be around for a long time. And food claims, they kind of see right through that. Melissa touched on that too. They want value, and they want it to be for a good reason. They're looking for nutrition, but they're not looking for BS. So don't try to market that to them. And as Melissa mentioned, they're very curious about cooking thanks to the elevation of chefs on television and the popularity of meal kits. So television, when I was even thinking about becoming a chef many years ago, it wasn't to get on TV. And I think that a lot of kids now who are going into culinary schools are thinking, well, I'm going to get my big break and get a TV show. And which is kind of silly and not really that realistic. But what it's done is it's brought cooking into the homes and lives of many of this generation. So whether they think they can be a famous chef is not really the point. They know cooking because it's in front of them constantly. The advent of meal kits has now brought that food that they're seeing on TV into their homes. And nobody is more trend-based than the meal kit people, right? Because they've got to be, there's a bunch of them out there, and they're competing with each other, and they need to be the ones to bring you the fabulous recipe, the fabulous new ingredient. So kids are seeing that too. One of the things that we know unequivocally is that Generation Z is the digital native generation. It started with the millennials, but these kids have never known a world without that little screen. And they're constantly sharing, and they're constantly looking for the next thing, and they're constantly aware and speaking through their phones. This week in the New York Times, surprisingly, I was just figuring out what we were going to talk about for this, and I saw Inside Gen Z, New York Times, November 1st. So it was a bunch of kids talking to the New York Times about what it's like to be a member of Generation Z, which is very interesting, and they had lots of things to say. But this is Noah Lee in Canton, Georgia. She says, our generation is so into technology and phones that we don't see life around that. All day, every day, we text or post on social media. We only see things through our phones, which sounds like a bit terrifying to me. But then we get to Eleanor, who lives here in Seattle, and she's 16 years old. That is not Eleanor. That is a picture that Eleanor wanted to show to represent her version of Generation Z. A teenage girl is lighting a votive candle in a church. Every Sunday, Maxine attends church service with her family, something that her parents also did when they were teenagers. My generation lives in a different world than past generations. However, participating in traditions helps bring us together. So that's nice, right? At least we have somebody saying what I'm standing up here saying.
Eleanor couldn't be reached when we saw she lived in Seattle. We thought she'd be a great addition.
This was November 1st. I mean, we didn't have much time to get Eleanor. So how do we gather all this and market to Generation Z? Knowing that they're digital natives and they're used to one-click ordering, photo sharing, instant reviews, everything happens like that. They take a picture of the food, it's already out there. If you've screwed it up, sorry, because the picture's out there on Instagram. So we have to be very, very aware of that, that they're watching and sharing. Customization choices are key. We know from Chipotle, we know from Blaze Pizza that if you don't give them the ability to build their own meals, then they're going to the next place, which is right next door. It's just a huge thing. You're seeing it in schools. You're seeing it everywhere. Gone are the days of here Joey is your 3-component meal. It's what would you like on that? Flavor stations, very popular in schools. Whether it's just a hot sauce or a flavored salt replacement or something, it's herbs. They're able to customize even the lowliest of school lunches. Plant-based foods, sustainability is a real priority for Generation Z. They've seen firsthand that the world is heating up. They've seen that they need to get on board with that and make some serious choices. They are very interested in plant-based foods. Again, bodes very well for us. And we'll see some examples of those. Independence. They don't want to be confined to a cafeteria setting. I live in California where there is so much outdoor eating for K-12, it's kind of ridiculous. They can be in a fog belt and it can be 55 degrees all the time, but they go outside to eat. So one way to sort of mimic that, because that doesn't happen in the rest of the country, is to use food courts or food trucks to give kids that feeling of independence when it's lunchtime, and whether they're in K-12 or whether they're in college. Just get them out of that cafeteria setting and give them that feeling that they want and they're used to. With that goes mobility, grab and go, gourmet snacking, very undefined day parts for them when they're not in school, in a school setting. Lots of things to grab on the go and to eat on the go. They may not be sitting down to a meal, and they're multitasking all the time. So they need high quality snacks that they're just gonna munch on. And adventure, they're looking for the next great flavor. Always taking those snapshots. Always looking for that fun flavor combination that's really gonna resonate with them and therefore their friends.
So choices, as Coleen mentioned, they want choices. This is an example of chef's tables. We do, you wouldn't see this in a K-12 environment necessarily, but for CNU and corporate dining, we're doing a lot of this kind of thing, and sometimes it's just multiple whole grains with mix of vegetables, protein, and then usually 2 or 3 different sauces that they can choose from. And sometimes it's on a cold bar where you're tossing that all with greens of their choice, and sometimes it's hot where we're actually making whole grain bowls with that. Like the Bibimbap Bowl. So I read the history on this, and so this originated in Korea, and it was thought to have originated on the eve of the Lunar New Year. By the way, that means mixed rice. That's what that word means. So on the eve of the Lunar New Year, it was thought that they had to clean out their fridge. They had to take all of the leftovers they had and mix them with rice. And I thought, well, in Minnesota, we call that hot dish. But we also see bowls like the Harissa roasted vegetable bowl, Harissa being one of those real big, impactful flavors that we saw trending a couple years ago. Again, something just as simple as that can accent the whole grains.
Bowls, bowls, bowls. They're not leaving. They're not going away. They're fantastic. They're customizable. They bring in all different ethnicities. This is a pork chili Verde bowl with a rice blend. Really appealing to the eye. Again, can be created in any format, and they're not going away. And for a school lunch, very briefly, you have to have 3 components out of 5, which when I write recipes for K-12, I write them to be a reimbursable meal. So this has the proper amount of grain, the proper amount of vegetables, and the proper amount of protein. And then they menu it with an apple, and they menu it with milk, and out the door. So that's a fully reimbursable meal. We're being told we have to hurry. what's up next? Kofta. Oh, so here, let's talk about plant-based proteins a little, plant-based alternatives to meat. This is a Mediterranean dish called kofta, which is always made with meat. And it's meat with delicious things mixed in and wrapped around a stick. This has no meat. This has, I think it's like 7 different grains in it, and is a delicious alternative. It's, Generation Z would love this kind of thing because it's that twist, you've got the ethnicity there and you've got the plant-based alternative there, so.
That was actually a chef from Compass Group, and this is real life. This is being served in corporate dining.
Yeah.
So then we move on to burgers, and as we start looking to put a little less of the animal protein on the plate, we start hearing words like veg-centric, where sometimes it might be just a little bit of bacon that's added in for flavoring. So it's for those that aren't necessarily, they're not vegetarian, they're not vegan, but they are being mindful of what they put in their bodies, and they're wanting less of that animal protein. So we're starting to see, like turkey, for example. You see turkey burgers on a lot of the menus. Some are okay, some are not so good. It's hard to get a turkey burger to be, moist and have a little bit of fat added into it. But we're starting to find that if you're adding in ancient grains, whole grains to blends like this, you can actually create some extra value behind it, so people aren't just thinking about, I have to order the turkey burger to meet my diet requirements. Now they're starting to think about grains like Freekeh and Quinoa, and the wild turkey, it wasn't wild turkey, it was wild rice in the recipe. And this is actually a completely vegetarian burger, again, made with wild rice. We have some actually sorghum in here as well as lentils. And again, taking these and being able to add in the condiments, those are key. So the toppers for the burgers are essential to get these into the mouths of our diners. This is actually a completely vegan burger, so we use flaxseed slurry to create a little bit of a binder there. And we have, this is actually an allergen-free, completely free of the 8, so we used a gluten-free bun as well for that.
This is Minneapolis Public Schools food truck. And when I mentioned food trucks earlier, I understand that you're not going to hire a bunch of food trucks to come up to a school. This is something this is an old school bus, and what they use it for is marketing. And they drive it around to schools. This is very common in school districts that have progressive directors. And it's a really great way to try out new food items and ingredients. So they could be showing a different, they're very big into education, especially with whole grains. So they would be maybe showing a sorghum blend one day, and the kids run out and they eat it because it's independence for the kids to get out of the classroom. So this is a really, really great marketing tool for schools as well. These are shaker salads. I was in LA last week doing a demo with a bunch of school kids at LAUSD, and I basically told stories and got them really super excited about grains, and gave them the history, gave them the why, gave them the what's in it, and a couple of stories and why it's good for you. Generation Z, you can actually say now it's good for you, and they don't put their nose up. And to me, that was a light bulb moment for me to see that the kids were like, oh, and it's good for you? I was like, what happened? When did this happen? What year is this? So super excited about that. And snacking really just key, and we have to keep pushing the limit, keep raising the bar. These are Power Bites. Each one of them has a different nut butter inside, with some honey and some puffed amaranth inside, and then outside is toasted quinoa and wild rice and brown rice. They're really fun. They're really nutritious. They're really delicious, and they're super easy to make. That's a Pinterest moment right there. And beverages. I'm going to do this quickly because I know we're running out of time, but you will be tasting this. we wondered, we're always wondering what's next. And I thought, well, maybe if we start doing beverages, that'll get somebody's attention. So I developed, we went into the studio, into the photo studio, and with just an idea for these grain beverages. I didn't know what we were going to do. I only knew. Can you put that the picture up again, if that's possible, just to show you what I had to work with? We went into the studio with just a thought, and it was just colors. And so then I had to write the recipes around the colors, which was interesting. So yeah, so there's a pink one, there's a green one, and I thought, well, I don't know what it's going to be. So this is how we came up with the Brazilian acai. So this is I'm making a shake, and this is, I've put in the black rice, the Neroni black rice. I've put in some blueberries, some coconut. If anybody's ever had an acai bowl, it's all the ingredients in an acai bowl. This is acai puree. Throw in a little banana. So I just had to figure out what these things were going to be after the pretty pictures, and they came out so nicely in the picture. There's some banana, and here's some honey. You're not going to be tasting this one, but you are going to be tasting